Well, welcome everybody. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce today's speaker, Pablo Beneito. He actually needs no introduction, as most of you already know him. He is a professor at the Department of Translation and Interpretation at the University of Murcia in Spain, that, as you all know, is the birthplace of Ibn Arabi. So I always like to think of him as the right man in the right place. He is the author of numerous works, essays, articles, monographical works. It's very hard to sum them up. And also the curator of numerous critical editions of Ibn Arabi's works. He is among the major specialists worldwide in Ibn Arabi's studies. And on a more personal note, I am indebted to his work because among the multiple domains that he mastered, he has a special interest for the language issues in Ibn Arabi's thought. He is a specialist in the science of letters. He has an interest for hermeneutics, as we will see today in his speech. He also the director of MIAS Latina, Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi Society Latina. And it is in this capacity that he has been very supportive of all our activities as Perennia Verba. Since we met him in Sarajevo during the first edition of our summer school, since then we have developed a collaboration on multiple activities. And the proof of that is that he accepted to be co-organizer of this event as MIAS Latina, together with MIAS UK and the Officina di Studi Medievali. So thank you very much for these also. Now, MIAS Latina, it has lots of activities going on, lots of very interesting online seminars. It has a very active YouTube channel. So those of you who speak Spanish or Portuguese or Italian may be interested and may want to have a look at the MIAS Latina YouTube channel. Those seminars are also very interesting from a linguistic point of view because they are an experiment of interlinguistic communication and understanding, since, as Professor Beneito always encourages us to speak everybody in their language, and so they are very interested also from this point of view. Lastly, he is the director of an academic journal, which is called El Azufre Rojo, the Red Sulphur, which is also in the title of his talk today, which is an extremely interesting journal for those who have an interest in Akbarian studies. Is an open access journal, so you can download articles, you can read them online, and so yes, so we do encourage you to visit the site of El Azufre Rojo. As for today's talk, the title is "The Zajal of the Red Sulphur: Ibn Arabi's Hermeneutical Alchemy." Please, Professor Beneito.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much, Federico, for your kind words. And I would like to thank especially Perennia Verba for this collaboration with MIAS Latina you just mentioned, which I believe is being and will be in the future very fruitful. And also to thank the staff for this wonderful course and for inviting me to be part of it. It's a real honor and a joy to be with all of you today. And I would also extend my thanks to Steve Histenstein, who kindly read my draft of English translation of the poem I'm going to discuss, and for his suggestions. And also Mauricio Marconi, our colleague, who is also sent me a number of images of manuscript images of the text. So thank you to you all. And before I start properly the talk, I would like to remember a main figure in my life and work, who was my very admired professor, Federico Corriente, who recently passed away. So I would like to remember him with this modest talk and as a homage to think of him. He was his Arabic was really amazing. His courses in Arabic is one of the most beautiful classical spoken Arabic I ever heard. And he was a distinguished member of the Royal Academy of Spanish Language. And as an Arabist, his production is just amazing. But mainly, I believe he is the main scholar dealing with the Andalusian dialect, or one of the most relevant in last century. So first time I had the Diwan of Ibn Arabi in my hands was because of him at his office. And so a very significant figure also in my personal life. And he is the person who most deeply worked until our days in the text we are going to deal with. So to his memory. Now, first, later on, I will share with you my screen with the text and English translation and transliteration and some tables. Before I would like to say that this is meant to be a kind of informal talk, like a class more than a conference. I was aiming to produce a final writing of the forthcoming article, inshallah, but so far I have more questions than answers to many aspects of the text. So I would really enjoy if you take note of the questions raising, because some of you may have the right answer. So in addition to your possible personal questions, you might have contributions to make to certain points. I will start by introducing briefly some literary and linguistics aspects of the poem, which happens to be in a style called zajal. First of all, we have to get back to the Al-Andalus in between the 11th, 13th century and see how this new poetical style develops. Normally, those who study the muwashah, the strophic Hispanic Arabic poetry style, they consider that it was created by a certain character, which is significantly called the blind man of Cabra. And this is significant, as we shall see in the text itself. If it goes back to the 10th, 11th century, this gender really develops with the figure of Ibn Uthman al-Qurtubi. So Cordoba plays a main role in the diffusion and consolidation of this literary gender. So what are the characteristics of the muwashah in relation to classical poetry as in the Qasida? First of all, it introduces, following the threads of a lot of different Mediterranean previous poetical styles, the structure of an strophic distribution, which do not follow thus the monorhyme sequence of the classical Arabic Qasida, but divide the texts in parts, and those parts are called in different ways. As we shall see, referring to this particular poem, each stanza is called daur. And daur means also turning, means cycle. And the beginning of the poem is a sentence, normally a couple of sentences rhyming, and this is understood as the head, or as the markas, as the center, or as we shall see in Ibn Arabi's poem, as the matla. So the prelude, the introductory refrain, or the chorus. So the zajal that is in question now is completely connected to the structure of the muwashah. These poems, they have short verses in specific meters that accommodate to these brief lines, and they have normally a distribution of this kind of rhyme. The first introductory refrain would be a rhyme, and then, for example, in the first stanza, you would have a B, 3 lines rhyming, and then a, which is getting back, la vuelta, the way back to the main rhyme. And so subsequent stanzas will have different rhymes. The structure is not fixed. So sometimes in a stanza, you get a different number of lines. And sometimes you get, most often, 5 stanza, but it can be 6, 7, 8, or even more. So it's not such a fixed structure. And this is relevant in terms of the text we are going to discuss, because as I believe every formal aspect in a text by Ibn Arabi is deeply meaningful, so the number of lines and stanzas in this particular poem will be meaningful. So in this context, we see that this kind of poetry meant to be sung, to be played with music in the streets, is really a different approach to other kinds of literature. It became a really strong thread in Andalusian culture, and we can imagine people around the particular reciter or singer, sometimes with musicians or without them, and these people surrounding in the streets will sing the chorus together at the end of each stanza, repeating the beginning. These poems also contain a final line called the harja that has been very significant in the study of the linguistic situation at the time, because this final line tends to include, whether it is in an Arabic muwashah or in a Hebrew one, tends to include dialectal terms. So sometimes Romanism of Latin origin, or other expressions. So it's a multilingual expression that provides us a sense of what must have been this society in which Arabic, classical Arabic, was the cultivated language of culture, but then we had a diversity of languages coexisting. Certainly Berber in many forms, because of so many North African Berbers in the peninsula. So this must have been part of Ibn Arabi's own linguistic experience in many ways, although we don't have information about how much he would be familiar with Berber. We have to consider this background of his linguistic experience. Then we have all this diversity of dialectal later Latin that will later on become Castilian or Catalan or Portuguese or whatever. So a huge diversity of linguistic tendencies from Latin as well, together, of course, with Germanic words that would implement this previous Latin experience. And certainly we have a most significant aspect of the linguistic reality of Al-Andalus, which is the Andalusian dialect itself. As any dialect would have many variants, but we know that Ibn Arabi moved from Murcia to Seville and often visiting Cordoba, because of the proximity of both towns, in which, and knowing that the zajal mainly developed in Cordoba with Ibn Guzman, then we can imagine that Ibn Arabi's own dialect of the Andalusian diversity of dialectal expressions was quite close to this central expression of the Cordoban zajal. Zajal in the dialect means literally song, and it is the same for classical Arabic in a way we can find in the Lisan al-Arab or in the lexicon in different places. We can easily find this original meaning of raising the voice to sing. So literally song. As the muwashah is a belt that is turning around the body at least twice. So this image of ornament, of embellishment, also implies the circular movement of the cycles of the different of the strophic dimension of the poem. So the text we are going to deal with is very significant because it is the only one produced by Ibn Arabi we know of, or at least I know of, in Andalusian dialect. What is the difference of the muwashah and the zajal? The main difference is that the zajal is composed in dialect. Especially Ibn Arabi follows Ibn Guzman's style in writing fully in dialect. It's not a mixture of classical dialectal Arabic, but is fully in Andalusian dialect. So first of all, it will be for all those who are not familiar with an experience of the language that in fact Ibn Arabi was most often hearing around him when he was not with the learned men, and also most probably the language he was talking in during his Maghrebian period, most often in the markets, in the street, in the family life. So very, very interesting to consider that as a dimension of his own production. Now we think, why would he, well, first of all, let me tell that this muwashah and zajal Andalusian style would later on spread through the world and became very popular until our days. Of course, it influenced as well Spanish literature until our days as well, and we find zajal in Lope de Vega or in modern, for example, Rafael Alberti. So zajal has been afterwards a constant inspiration for Hispanic literature. But concerning the Arab world, we find very strong movements of muwashah and the zajal influence, particularly in Egypt or even in the contemporary Lebanese muwashah style. So this kind of poetry with music became extremely popular, particularly thanks to the famous poet Ashustari from near Granada. And Shustari is very directly connected to Ibn Arabi in the silsila of he offers to us where Ibn Arabi is mentioned, because he had 30 years, I think, when Ibn Arabi passed away. So he was very close also in life. He was a disciple of Ibn Sabain from Murcia. And so through this experience, he is immediately connected to Ibn Arabi in many senses. I believe it would be extremely fruitful to compare his muwashahat to those of Ibn Arabi. But saying so, Ibn Arabi is the first writer to transform popular, let's say, profane muwashah and zajal into a gender on the divine style. That's to say, to write a significant number of muwashah dealing with the deepest metaphysical, hermeneutical, spiritual, Sufi matters. Particularly his zajal is certainly the first one approaching this popular style with Sufi inspiration. We don't know whether his zajal was written before those of Shustari himself. They could have been coexistent, but in principle, we can guess that the zajal might have been written during his Jath or his Maghrebian period. I guess surrounding also the writing of Anka Mughrib and other Maghrebian writings, so that in this sense, easily it could have been the first popular zajal expression concerning Sufism in a deep way. So here we have a main literary expression of Ibn Arabi. I would say that he's probably the most relevant writer of Muwashahat. I believe he's, if not the greatest, one of the very great poets of the Arabic literature, and that applies as well to the Andalusian literature in these specific forms. Now, some questions rise. Why would Ibn Arabi choose to write such a deep poem, as we shall see, connected to the hermeneutics of the Quran and to the highest understanding of alchemy? Why would he choose a very popular musical style meant for the streets and for common people? He calls that lahn al-awam, so dialect and musical form. Particularly linked, as we'll see, to Ibn Uthman, who was a poet really with the spirit of, the speech in the street, even using bad words in his poems, and always connected to sense of humor, making people laugh. Well, a lot of questions. First of all, I would say that his choice of expressing himself in Andalusian dialect is connected to his understanding of the function of Al-Andalus and his own birthplace, among other things, and the fact that Al-Andalus is very meaningful as Al-Maghreb Al-Aqsa, so as the place of the Shams Al-Maghreb, the rising sun from the west, and also to his function of seal of the Muhammadian sainthood. So I don't think there is anything, like an anecdote or something in this choice, but on the contrary, as always in Ibn Arabi, a very deep choice of this singular writing, his only Andalusian strong expression, especially if we consider that whether we have 28 or 29 muwashahat, I believe they are 28 in the 27 or 28, I will refer to this later. I believe they are 28, and so his zajal somehow is the seal and the culmination of this ensemble that could be considered, I believe, but this needs further research, as a juz, as a section, as a whole composition with a certain degree of independence. So as a work in itself, meant to be part of his big Diwan al-Ma'arif, of his inclusive, comprehensive poetical work. So many questions that I hope to review during my talk, but now I would like to say something also about the previous works on the matter. Corriente in particular, well, first of all, it was Stern in his study on the Hispanic Arabic strophic poetry, I think the year 74, who found out and worked on this zajal, finding out that the kharja, the last verse, come precisely from a zajal by Ibn Uthman. So the one Ibn Uthman was previously published, and if we go to the zajal, to the song number 85, we precisely find, with tiny variants, the final line of this zajal by Ibn Arabi. So this connection to Ibn Uthman is very strong, as we see, and he do not only quotes from him, but he also follows the rhythmic pattern of the of the inspiring zajal by Ibn Cuthman, whose content is, by the way, understood in the poem itself. In Cuthman, zajal deals with in humorous style with the idea that for the Eid al-Adha, for the Paschal sacrifice of the lamb, you will have to pay, and the person has no money because he didn't care properly about having the means, so he was not saving, and then he's in trouble. Okay, so you see, humorous, popular, but this is going to be treated otherwise in Ibn Arabi's zajal. Now, so Stan discovered that, and he was the first to face this zajal academically in a way. And then, of course, it was edited in different ways. Unfortunately, the existing editions of the Diwan provide quite a weak version. And nevertheless, the main works on the zajal, those by Federico Corriente, also with the collaboration of Ed Emery in a book I'm going to show you, they are based on these printed editions. Emery and Corriente, they were working separately on translating this Muwashahat and zajal, but finally they collaborated together, and they did it in this work. I show you if you can see. And this is strange because they say 27 muwashahat and 1 zajal. And in this book, this is a provisional edition. It's not meant to be a final work. So it's not easy to find because of that. It has not properly been distributed, but it's a very important, most relevant work on this matter. And they choose to speak of 27 muwashahat only, while in a previous article you can find in the web the strophic poetry of Ibn Arabi. Okay, it's easy to find in the web, and particularly dealing with the zajal, Corriente is considering 28 muwashahat as they appear in the printed edition, and the zajal. Why this change? I don't know, because they do not provide an answer. They omitted muwashah number 16, and they don't say anything about it. So if anybody knows a possible reason for that, maybe it was just a mistake or a strange omission. I don't know. I would consider, for the purposes of my talk, that there are 28 muwashahat as in the printed edition, plus the zajal. They were conscious that a deeper work would need critical edition. Fortunately, in our days, I'm waiting for 2 critical editions of the Diwan. One it has been already published, but I don't have it. I haven't seen it yet. And it is by Al-Mansoub, the same, Abdelaziz Al-Mansoub, the same editor of the Futuhat and so many other works. So I'm really looking forward to see what he did with the zajal, if he managed to produce a critical edition. Nevertheless, this would have been very difficult for somebody not familiar with the Andalusian dialect. We are also waiting for the volume of Abdelillah Ben Arfa, the Moroccan researchers who is publishing also the Diwan edition by volumes. I'm also waiting for the volume containing the zajal to appear. His edition is not that critical, but is really useful. And he would have a knowledge, because as a Moroccan, as he would be familiar with the dialectal spectrum bundle of dialects of North Africa and Al-Andalus. So let's see what do they produce. So I would like to tell that it would be extremely interesting if somebody would face in the future a revision of the critical edition of the forthcoming, or the Mansoub's critical edition with the valuable manuscripts, and a new translation, because that produced by Corriente and Emery is, as they themselves express in their very brief introduction, provisional, let's say even precarious, in the sense that is limited to this printed edition that has quite a lot of mistakes. And then it's a work to be done. It would need a new approach, and they were very conscious of it. I will read you a phrase of it is 2 pages introduction actually, because it contains mainly the transliteration of the poems and the English and Spanish versions. But look at what they say. This is quite rare because, I mean, let's say that Corriente has always been a very sober academician, etc. He loved Ibn Arabi very, very much, but he never wanted to write about him because he didn't feel prepared to do so. So he was very serious in his restraint, despite his amazing capacity. And they say, the physical structure of this muwashahat on the written page seems to imply the presence of geometry and number. Geometry, number, gematria, and arcane meanings of number are an area that might reward examination. Another muwashah writer of the period comes to mind, the Jewish poet Abraham ibn Ezra, who combined his poetic vocation with that of geometer and astronomer. A very interesting comment. They were conscious that the distribution of lines and the use of elements in these muwashahat and zajal poems were connected to a sense of symbolic geometry and number issues. And this is really relevant for my purpose today in sharing the reading of these texts with you. I'm particularly concerned in recent works, and particularly in my recent study with Steve Histenstein, in the use of numbers to interpret all aspects of a poem, of any Akbarian text, but in particular in poetry, as the highest expression of the Akbarian discourse, connected to the poetry of the universe, to poetry as the origin of all things. Ibn Arabi reminds us in his chapter on the letters that the first hermeneutic key, al-miftah al-awwal, to contemplate the dynamic of numbers in reality is to consider the units 1 to 9 as the basic original expression of meanings underlying words. So in the minor system of the abjad calculation. So abjad would be one other dimension we are going to deal with in connection of our understanding of the poem. Now, why did I choose this poem in particular? Because for this context of the summer course, because I believe it deals from beginning to end with al-insan al-kamil, a term that is not mentioned, but the term insan is mentioned, and we'll see that from an abjad point of view, the reference to the insan is permanent. We'll see something else, is that he explicitly mentions when introducing the poem that it is connected, that he's using the alfaz al-jawahir, the terms dealing with the gemstones that Abu Hamid al-Ghazali used. So he's referring to his work, Jawahir al-Quran, a work we are going also to discuss. I produce a small table as a resume of the main terms we are going to deal with in the poem, because it is a very difficult poem. It's of high alchemical symbolism, dealing with the stones and other substances, and it's difficult to understand. So one wonders, gosh, this is a popular poem in dialect, and nevertheless, it deals with the highest alchemical symbolism of gemstones, which refers, as we shall see in Ghazali's work, to the different levels of the Quranic verses. Well, it's quite something to sing in the streets. He's presuming a reception from his public that is quite astonishing. We know through Emery and Corriente that, according to them, they mention that this tradition of Ibn Arabi's Muwashahat remains alive in our time. I have not proof of that, and if somebody has got the connection of the researcher Ed Emery, I believe in England, maybe London, I would be very, very thankful, because it would be great to be in touch with him and ask him some questions and collaborate with him in further developments. In particular, where is this tradition alive in our time? We know that the Muwashah gender is very alive in Morocco, in Algeria, and many other countries, even in France. But where they have seen this would be a very interesting thing. They were in touch with Jane Clark, our colleague, and so they knew of the MIA's catalog of manuscripts. I think they met her in Istanbul, so they have seen some of the manuscripts of the poem, but they decided they were not able at the moment to work with this material, so they restrained themselves to the printed editions. Nevertheless, Corrientes' knowledge of the Andalusian dialect allowed him to correct the text in many points, and they are, most of them, really correct. Now, let me tell you something about the Andalusian dialect. We are going to see once I share the screen, but the zajal, being dialectal, does not work as the quantitative Arabic classical poetry. You know that as Latin or Greek, Arabic rhythm is based on long and brief syllables. So the dialect, being North African or Andalusian, belongs to a different approach, which is a stressed syllable it plays the quantity in the accent, in the tonic accent. So we'll see with examples, but Corriente has been the first to emphasize and to demonstrate, I believe, that the poetry in Andalusian, whether it is by Ibn Qusman or by Ibn Arabi, it follows this pattern of accent. And the accent sometimes follows in a syllable that is short. So this accent rhythm is not following the same pattern as the quantitative classical prosody. Nevertheless, it is connected to it. So it is an intermediary way, because it keeps a deep relation. In most cases, it keeps a relation with the classical structures. As we shall see, this poem is in meter rajas, but it has this freedom of adapting to the accentual rhythm. Okay, this is very important because, as we shall see, his speech will even include Latin words in the poem. Okay, I think it's time to share the text because I fear I'm consuming most of my time and we haven't seen the text. Let me share a screen. Where is that to share a screen? I hope here. Yes. Let me see. Okay, here it is. So let's go on with the English translation of Ibn Arabi's Zajal on the gemstones. He introduces the poem by saying, and he, the poet, that's Ibn Arabi, said also in a poem composed in the Zajal style, which is a popular dialectal song, Lahn al-Awam, in which he mentions the terms related to the gemstones, al-Fath al-Jawahir, used by Abu Hamid al-Ghazali in his Jawahir al-Quran. Then here we see, well, I have to say that the zajal in the printed editions appears as the poem 22, if we would number after the muwashahat. But I believe in as a juz, as I think I have seen in some manuscripts, it would be the end of the juz, of the whole composition in muwashah. So it would be number 29. Okay, here we can see what Raja's method means, transforming long and brief main possibilities into syllables like that, tan, tan, ta, tan, so long, brief. These particular Rajas would be tan, tan, ta, tan, 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 ta, tan, ta, tan, tan. Okay, this is the rhythmic structure. Now we'll face the beginning of the poem. So it appears as matla in the text, but I still wonder whether this is a term introduced by Ibn Arabi himself or by later editors. Anyway, it would be very significant. It means the prelude, the core, the refrain, but it also means, as we know, the rising place. So is the place of origination of the whole and the place also where things get back permanently in the poem as a rhythm. Now, see how this would be in classical Arabic. The first line, composed by, in fact, by two hemistiches, it would be يا طالب التحقيق انظر وجودك ترى جميع الناس عبيد عبيدك. Now see how it becomes in Andalusian style. يا طالب التحقيق انظر وجودك ترى جميع الناس عبيد عبيدك. Okay, you see the rhythm is different. I don't say طالب, but I say طالب, etc. And you may say, if you see the cursor, the last word abidik would not rhyme, while in dialectal is abidak. Okay, and this is a change. And instead of undur, in dialectal would be andur, things like that. Okay, so we see some changes. This is a very important line, but before I start talking about the meanings, let's read through the poem itself. O seeker of verification, observe your existence. You will see that all people are the servants of your servants. قعدت في ساحل البحر الأخضر أرمت لي أمواج الدور الأسهار فقلت لا تخفى الياقوت الأصفار وارمي به نطلع إلى محيدك. I was sitting by the shore of the green sea. Its waves cast up to me shining pearls. And I said, do not forget my yellow topaz. Throw it to me that I may rise to your hideout. أرماد لي في الحين معه ذرا أكحاب فقلت أوفيني عنبر الشحاب قالت نعم إن كان تعمل لي مركاب من عودك الفواح وحود نسيدك. At the very moment, she cast up to me with it gray pearls. And I said, grant me as well your gray ambergris. She said, yes, if you make an ark for me from your fragrant aloe, take and I shall give you more. سبرجدا أخضار ومسكا أظفار والدريك الأكبار الله أكبر فأنا هو المطلوب وقال والصار لمن تريدني قول إليك نريدك. Emeralds, the most perfumed musk and the greatest terraica, God is greater, for I am the one that is sought. And he said as an instruction, when you seek for me, say, it is you I am looking for. وامشي على الساحل واطلب وافتاش ياقوت الأحمر لعل تنعاش فإن لقيت إنسان أعمى وأعماش وقال لمن تطلب فقول لسيدك. Go along the shore and seek and search for my red ruby, perhaps you will pick it up. And if you find a blind, blurry-eyed human being, and he asks for whom you are looking, say, your Lord. يا طالب الصنع وفار حياتك، وانظر إلى الإكسير على صفاتك، تجاد من ذاتك يسري لذاتك، مربع التركيب على وجودك. O seeker of the work, make your life complete and observe the elixir in your attributes. You will find that it flows from your essence to your essence in a fourfold composition upon your being. كبريتك الأحمر لقد هو معلوم وهو على التحقيق أجل معدوم حفيظ ظهار للعين مرموز ومفهوم فذاب قد بانت جوار وريدك وعمت أسرار أركان جديدك. Your red sulphur is something known. According to verification, it is the most sublime non-existent, which being hidden appears to the identity, and coded in symbols, it is understood. And now close to your jugular vein, its secrets have appeared and pervade the foundations of your renewed being. العابد إذا فرات لابد يندم ويعمل الحيلة ولا تفيد ثام فقلت قل قبلك من قد تقدم من أول على الشور انظر في يدك الحيلة وقت الضيق يليس تفيدك. If the servant is remiss, he will have to repent and work to avoid it, but that will be useless by then. So I said, there was before you a predecessor who said, from the beginning of the 10 days of Ashura, prepare the Paschal lamb for the celebration of your Eid, since evasion at the time of constraint will be of no avail. Well, that was the poem and some appreciations in it. As you see here, you have the structure of a stanza. So you see this is a turning, and you have the A verse up is the matla, and then you have B rhyme, and getting back to the A rhyme. So interesting to consider some considerations of the overall structure. First of all, as it appears in the manuscripts and the printed edition, we have 28 lines, because each stanza of 7 has got 4 lines. So 28 that correspond to the letters, of course. In one of them, Washahad, Ibn Arabi says, the poet says, he is the 28 letters, he is the letters, the huruf. So if we add the previous matla, we have a total of 29, which is lam alif. So on the one side, 28 lines are there for the 28 muwashahat that represents the whole of the alphabet, and as many things as the 28 symbolizes as the phases of the moon or whatever. So they are a whole, and Ibn Arabi in his Andalusian song, who represents, I believe, himself as Insan Kamil, and also in his condition of Kibrit Ahmar, of red sulfur, he is expressing here a synthesis of the whole section of this strophic poetry. So I think there is a symbolism for the whole and an inclusive symbolism relating to the inclusive nature of the Insan Kamil in this particular poem. So in a sense, this poem is an image of the Insan Kamil himself, and is a graphic expression in many approaches and senses of the red sulfur. So I choose that because I think it's the most expressive, eloquent text on the reality and nature of the Kibrit al-Ahmar. Now, so we have seven sections, cycles, turning, of 4 verses. And this is a tawaf. This is the Insan Kamil is going from the beginning, from the rising place, from the matla. He's turning around the Kaaba, and he's making 7 cycles around the 4 corners. Okay, and so the poem is the completion of a tawaf. Also being with the first line, the 29, as the 29th letter mentioned by the Prophet as Lam Alif, the Lam Alif here, the 29, which makes also 11, 2 plus 9, is an expression of both sides of the Kibrit al-Ahmar and the Insan Kamil, which is his Lahut. So it's a reference to the Huwiya of value 11, and it's a reference to the La, to the Lam Alif of value 4, related to the Kaaba, the 4 corners, but also to the practice and the nature of the Insan Kamil. And well, so yes, one aspect we have to keep in mind this presence of the symbolism, numerical symbolism of the number 6 we find in the rhyme. We have here, if you see Abidak or Wujudak, especially Abidak, which is the permanent rhyme as in Mahidak, it is composed by a dal and a kaf. So the kaf is very important because equals 20 or 2. So it's related to the 11 of the Huwiya, but also to the value of the Al-Kaaba, which is 20 as the kaf, and is the kaf Al-Kaun, and is the kaf of Kibrit itself. But together with the previous dal, which is the Rawi, is the main letter of the rhyme of value 4, like the Lam Alif, and the 4 corners, together they make 6, which is the value of the letter Waw, representing the Insan Kamil, and is the value of the word Insan, or is the value 6 of Al Insan Al Kamil, which is also the value of the heart, Qalb, number 6. So the heart, the Insan, the Kaaba, and many other symbolism are related in this poem to refer both to the Insan, to the Kaaba, to the heart. Now, if we look, for example, at the very beginning, we have the 11, Ya, from the Alif to the Ya, okay, from the beginning to end, but also 11. And immediately we have Talib, a very key word, which is also value 6, okay? So many other symbolism of numerical nature I will not be able to comment on because those are hundreds, but I hope to produce a clear article on the matter so that you can follow. Anyway, we have now the main structure. I can also say that concerning the rhymes, there are, Ghazali in his work mentions at-talib and matlub, and these are 2 key terms of the poem. So Ibn Arabi is not only using the terms referring to gemstones and other substances, but also keywords in Ghazali's writing, which is dealing also with the rumuz, with the nature of symbols, explaining them by their relation both to the malakut and to the mulk, to the intelligible and the sensible or spiritual and physical, etc. So he's using, among others, the keyword talib. Talib al-tahqiq or talib al-sana are 2 expressions that divide the text as a mirror. When Ghazali mentions talib and matlub in his Jawahir al-Quran, he's discussing the image of the mirror, the mirror of the lahut in the nasut. So the Insan Kamil as a mirror and a barzakh of the 2 realms. Thus, this talib al-tahqiq is the Insan Kamil himself. So the address is, who is addressing this seeker of verification? In fact, I would say that the whole poem is presented as a dialogic experience of theophany, because in fact it is the divine somehow who is addressing the seeker in his condition of Insan Kamil to follow a certain procedure in his journey. Okay, so in the text we have a journey through the gemstones or substances that represent different levels of a progression into the meanings of the Quran related to the different nature of the Quranic ayat. And in order to understand this, I will go to this text. I think this sentence very well summarizes what the work of Ghazali is about, especially the first part, which has significantly 19 chapters, 19 being the number of wujud. Okay, so interesting, these 19 chapters. But in this work, first I will read to facilitate for those who can read Arabic, وَإِنْ جَمَعَتَ الْأَقْسَامِ السِّتَّ الْمَذْكُورَةِ, because he's discussing the 6 aims, the six maqasid of the Quranic speech. So making 6 approaches to classify 6 main categories of a speech. And then he says, مع شعوبها المقصودة في سلك واحد ألفيت عشرة أنواع. So now he's saying that these 6 categories can be in fact divided or considered as 10 divisions. And those 10 are the following: ذكر الذات, referring to the essence, to the divine essence. So those ayat, those verses that refer to the divine essence. For example, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلُهُ شَيْءٍ, there is nothing similar to him, for example, an expression of transcendence of the essence that is provided by Ghazali. وَذِكْرُ الصِّفَاتِ, so the second one would be those referring to the divine attributes. وَذِكْرُ الْأَفْعَالِ, so those referring to the divine actions. وَذِكْرُ الْمَعَادِ, so this would be those verses referring to eschatology, in particular to the ma'ad, to paradise, to the na'im, etc. Let's say the most positive approach to eschatology. وَذِكْرَ الصِّرَاطَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ, and this is connected, in fact, not to eschatology, but to the practical following of the path. Okay, all those things connected to commands and practical aspects to follow the path. And he says, Ani janibaya taskiyati wa tahliya. So without this subdivision, we wouldn't have 10, but only 9. So we have to consider that there is in this section, which will correspond to the pearls, as we shall see, we have those relating to the taskiya, to purification, and those relating to the tahliya, adornment, embellishment. Very important line. So dhikra wa dhikr ahwal al-awliya. So on the mention, those are the verses referring to the mention of the prophets, of the friends of God, etc. And following the opposite mention of the states of the enemies of God. So there you have Nimrod, and you have Fir'aun, and you have so many others. And then you have those verses which refer to muhajjat al-kuffar, so to the arguments of the infidels, of those who are unbelievers, etc. So all kind of accusations to the prophet or denials of aspects of belief, etc. And finally, the dhikr, the mention of hudud al-ahkam, of the limits, of the commands, of the principles ruling the life of the believer. So this is mainly connected to the aspects of his inner journey. So this concerns his how he lives, how he eats, how he does his own journey. Okay, also in quite practical terms, let's say. So first distinction is that Ghazali explains that there are jawahir, all those versicles, so gemstones, referring to God's essence in a very open sense, not just the very essential ones, but also those who concern the divine somehow, and dur, pearls, that are the practical description of the path, pearls. So that brings a question, is that most translations we can find in Italian, in French, les perles del Corano, les perles du Coran, which recently appeared in Al-Burak, or there are also some English versions of the text. Unfortunately, no Spanish version yet that I know. Anyway, those using the title Pearls, yes, are in a way a bit mistaken. I know it sounds nice and clear and it's a common image, but they should should be the gemstones of the Quran, or even the precious stones or the jewels, because that's the emphasis of the text is on this aspect. So I had to summarize in this table two different numberings. The number of the 6 maqasid, this is aims, purposes of the versicles, together with these final 10 sections, okay, and how they come together. So you will see an apparent disorder, but in fact is the order for here should be there, but is to make compatible both tables. This is very important because this is the very structure of the poem itself, where we have 6, so the name of the wow and the Insan Kamil, and we have 10, which is the final result of the poem in many respects, as the 28 will make 2 + 8, 1, etc. Oneness is a permanent issue in the poem. As wujud being 19 is 1 + 9, so it's 1 to 9, the whole, but it's also oneness in itself. Okay, so this dialogue of numbers is expressed also here in Ghazali's approach. So first of all, we have al-Kibrit al-Ahmar, which come to mean for Ghazali and for Ibn Arabi certainly, ma'arifat Allah. So knowledge of God. In what sense? The Kibrit al-Ahmar is not number here, as you see, because it is an inclusive reality of 3 yawaqit, of 3 corundums that are distinguished by Ghazali as this: al-Yaqut al-Ahmar, so the red ruby, and then we have, which is the essential, the essence, connected to the essence, those verses that are al-Yaqut al-Akhab, so this other bluish gray corundum that would be connected to the attributes, and al-Yaqut al-Asfar, the yellow one that would be connected to the actions. So the 3 of them compose the spectrum of the Ma'arifatullah, which where al-Kibrit al-Ahmar is an inclusive reality. Of course, we could immediately relate it to the highest degree, which is the red ruby, and say that the red ruby is the closest expression as a symbolic substance and stone and crystal of the hidden nature of the Kibrit al-Ahmar. As a second, we have the Adur, the pearls, and this signifies the knowledge of the Suluk and the Wusul. So they are related to the knowledge concerning the way and the arrival. So as I said, is connected to the practical aspects of the path. And then Ghazali only refers to this as Adhur al-Azhar that we'll find in Ibn Arabi. But Ibn Arabi introduces a term, I have to read more carefully, but I didn't find yet Adhur al-Akhab in Ghazali's. So I put it here as Ibn Arabi's interpretation, I think, of this division in 2 of the pearls. So the first Zur al-Azhar, the shining pearls, would refer to the purification and the following and the deviator, the path. And then Ad-Dur al-Akhab would refer to the tahliya, to the embellishment, and the wusul, and the arrival. So one question that raises this text and Ibn Arabi's poem, because there al-Yaqut al-Akhab, so the attributes, is not mentioned in the poem. But we have Ad-Dur al-Akhab that is not mentioned in Ghazali. So is there is connection of the Yaqut al-Akhab with this term and the Dur al-Akhab? I believe there is, because precisely this Yaqut is connected to the attributes, and the tahliya, the embellishment, is connected to the tahalluk, to embellishing oneself with the divine attributes. So one mystery to solve there, interesting. Then we have a Sumurrud al-Akhdar, which is the green emerald. And here there is a linguistic issue, but Ibn Arabi uses in dialectal Sabarjadan Akhdar. So Sabarjad Akhdar is interpreted as green chrysolith or peridot. I think, yeah, I forgot to mention the very important article by our colleague Luca Patrizzi on the gemstones, on the symbolism of the gemstones, particularly related to writing and scripture and scriptures. He provides a wonderful study of the history of the use of stones as a symbolic reference in ancient and Greek tradition, and especially in the Judeo-Christian tradition, culminating in the Islamic tradition, where he studies, among other things, this text by Ghazali, briefly but deeply, and also two of Ibn Arabi's texts, the Fusus and the Anka Mughrib in particular. I have to say that in this poem, he's using the minerals in a different way to any other of his texts, because he's really connecting here with Ghazali's work. For example, the Sumurrud, I understand that in this text, thus the Zabarjad is really the emerald. And you'll see that in the text, sometimes I translate in plural, sometimes in singular. In fact, the term is like a singular. The term referring to the stones is a singular, but is understood is this kind of them. It's a generic as well. So it's both presences, singular and plural together. So I say the emeralds, but I could just say the green chrysolith, for example. Anyway, we can distinguish those kinds because the stones, you know, are complicated in history, the names, but I think we can identify the Sabarjad to the Sumurrud. Certainly here, Ibn Arabi is not referring to the Sumurrud as a Nafs al-Kulliya, as the universal soul, as he would do, for example, in his Istilahat, okay? He's not referring here to the Durrat al-Bayda as the Aql al-Awwal, as the first intellect, as he would do elsewhere. So his treatment of stones in different works is different because of the symbolical transitivity. Okay, a symbol adopts different meanings in different contexts and interrelations. Now, so this emerald is connected to paradise and this kind of eschatology, and the ambar wal oud, the amber gray, and the oud, and this wooden resin, I don't know how we say. So these two materials come together in the same maqsad, in the same, if you see number 4, but they are distinguished in the other. So the amber is related to the states of to the conditions of the awliya, and the oud, the wood, is connected to the states of the so-called enemies. Here is where Ibn Arabi introduces the idea of markab, of the vehicle, which I translated as ark in reference of so many texts of him that provide us the image of the fulk or the safina or the markab as an ark, which is the circle, the circumference of circumambulating the Kaaba with the center. So here Ibn Arabi says, the poem says that from this oud he should make his markab. Okay, makes sense. It's wooden, and the markab is so the ark should be constructed precisely here, in the place connected to the verses referring to the enemies. And this is really amazing. This is an amazing feature of the poem. This refers to so many, especially because look, oud is from the root of aud, returning, getting back to the divine origin. So as Ghazali would say, the oud has the quality, explaining this, he would say the yakut, the ruby is used like this because it's the most precious of these stones and is so the highest in degree. The oud is used here because, according to him, because when it is just wood, it has not this particular property, but when it does burned up, so it gives the perfume. So these enemies must be transformed by divine alchemy into their inner essential perfume nature. Okay, so interesting that the markup, this arc, has to be built up precisely within the context of this alchemical transformation of the opposites into their golden origin. Okay, then we have at-Tiryak al-Akbar. Ibn Arabi uses Diryak in Andalusian, which is the Tarayaka, the Greek term, Arabized, and it's called al-Akbar. So immediately we provide this play on words for Ibn Arabi, which is this Tarayaka would be Allahu Akbar. Okay, and this is connected to the arguments of the infidels as well. Okay, so Ibn Arabi, so Ghazali would explain that precisely is connected to the kuffar and their poisonous arguments, like saying, for example, that the Prophet is Majnun, is crazy, or things like that. So this would be the antidote, okay? Because the Tarayaka is precisely an antidote, and we see that as well Tiryak as both expressions have 6 letters, Allahu Akbar as well, 6 different letters. So this is connected to the very nature of the Insan Kamil, who is in himself as Kibrit al-Ahmar in this aspect of realization of the condition of Kibrit al-Ahmar. He would be himself also the Tiryak. In a sense, we could say that all these steps, hermeneutic alchemical steps, are names of the Insan Kamil. Okay, so finally not. Then we have here in the 6th, yes, finally, we have al-Musk, al-Athfar. So the musk, the mask, the perfume mask is connected to how you live, is precisely the place in which Ghazali introduces the idea of the markup. And he says, al-Badan, the human body, is the vehicle. So this musk deals with the idea of how you take care of your bodily reality. This is transformed into Ibn Arabi poem. Well, I would say that generally the treatment of symbols in Ibn Arabi goes farther, I believe, than Ghazali's explanations on the nature of symbols that is really relevant in this work, but do not cover the extent of Ibn Arabi's understanding and use of symbols and the realm of imagination. So you see that the markup has been transferred from the musk to the oud, and I find this significant. Okay, it will be difficult to keep that in mind to get back to the text. Let me perhaps show to you some numerical associations. For example, Talib is 6, and Talib at-Tahqiq, where at-Tahqiq equals 1, so equals wujud, which is the first mentioned, Ya Talib unzur wujudak. Okay, so wujud is immediately mentioned as the object of observation. So the whole thing is a play on the 6 and the 1, so it equals 7, which is the 7th stanza, with all the meanings of 7 on the 7 cycles. For example, al-Kibrit al-Ahmar, where Kibrit will equal also 6, 15 as the Talib, plus the al-Ahmar together will also equal 7 as the structure of the zajal, as the Talib at-Tahqiq. We have to see that, for example, markup equals 10, so it's related to unity, and Uduk al-Fawah, the expression related to it, the matter from which the poet has to build up the markup, also equals 19 as the wujud, and so 10, finally 10, 1 plus 9. So is building up the vehicle of unity from unity itself, from reuniting what is dispersed in the 19 into the original oneness. So at the Riyak al-Akbar, for example, the Terayaka is composed of 6 different letters, and the same for Allahu Akbar, that would equal 1. So finally, oneness is also the antidote in a sense, right? And its relationship with the sixness, with the sixfold nature of the Insan Kamil. And look at that, when we are considering the structure of the poem, we have 3 stanza, first part introduced by Talib al-Tahqiq, 3 stanza after the expression Talib as-Sana'a, the seeker, the one who seeks to realize the alchemical work, Sana'a. So those two are in conjunction. So those are like the mirrors. In the first 3 stanza rhyme in 2, precisely with the letters of Akbar, with the Kabara, which are the letters of Kibrit as well as Akbar. So the Kibrit expression also refers to this condition of Kibriya, of exaltation, of incomparability. Now the 3 stanzas are rhyming in 2, and the 3 last rhyming in 4, with a dal or with a mim as the rawi, as the main letter. Okay, there are many other numerical approaches, but this let us feel that there is a mirroring in the middle. The middle stanza 4, precisely 4, the tetractys and the 4 corners of the Kaaba, rhymes in 1, and the letter shin, and the letter shin being 1000, being the final of the alphabet, is also the letter 28. So it's the oneness synthesizing the previous 28 muwashahat, all the degrees of the letter, and the expression, the ultimate expression of the alphabet. And Ibn Arabi, of course, in dialect especially, he's using his preferred abjad system that he privileges as the system of the people of the secrets, of the Asrar mentioned in the text, which is the Occidental Maghrebian Garbi system. So in this system, Shin is the last letter. So one could see that the Kibrit al-Ahmar and his own function as a seal of the Muhammadian sainthood is here represented by this letter Shin that might be connected to the image in Anka Mughrib of Shamsul Maghreb, the sun coming from the west. If we think of his Kitab al-Isra, for example, recently translated into French as well, was already in Polish. And well, if we think of that, he started the book, the pilgrimage of the Viator, the Suluk, starts by saying, I travel min al-Andalus il al-Quds, where we see the Andalusian pronunciation, min al-Andalus il al-Quds. And so he gives a high symbolical significance to Al-Andalus. It's not only the pride of an Andalusian who considers the specificity of this land, both cultural and, as he says, for example, in Kitab al-Abadila, also spiritual. But I think this clearly refers to his function as an Andalusian seal. And so look at that. Here we see this play on words in the mirror. We have these 3 stanza mirroring the other 3 in different ways. We can say 1 mirrors 4, or we can think that 1 mirrors 7. We have to still approach this geometry to see possibilities. But the fact is that somehow it is an hexagon with a center, representing the 6 faces of the Kaaba, and the center, and this relation of the 6 to the 7. So al-Matlub, which also comes to equal, where Matlub comes to equal 6 as Talib, but the whole expression comes to equal 1. Okay, so we are always, what is looked for is oneness. Now, if we get back to the text, I don't have more time. I was thinking I could have the time to read through and comment on each verse, but I do not, and perhaps it's better if we just let's do something like that. So, for example, when he is sitting by the shore has also a value of 6. So this is meaningful because he is sitting in the condition of the wow, in the condition of Insan Kamil. So it's a barzakh in between the two realms of Malakut and Mulk. And it's from there that all this is theophanic hermeneutic experience is going to happen, the reception of all these levels of the divine speech. This is happening in Al-Bahr al-Akhdar, in the Green Sea. The Green Sea here is a name for the Quran. Ghazali refers to as the Bahr al-Muhit in his book, but here is understood as, and he also talks of different seas. For example, there is a sea for the Dur, there is a sea for the pearls. So there are many seas within this comprehensive, inclusive ocean of the Quran. So first he is receiving the brilliant pearls, and he establishes this well, first we have the waves, the amwash, that are somehow casting up the pearls. And so he responds to this plural presence, okay? And he uses this interesting term, nadla, ascension. So he's ascending from this sitting place. There is a process of ascension, in a sense. And he asked for ascension to a second person mahid. The mahid is can be understood as an escape, is the hideout or hideaway, because it's the place precisely where she, as the divine presence, whether it is expressed in the plurality of the names of the waves, or it is expressed as a singular person, masculine or feminine in the text, is the place where she hides. So he's asking for an ascension toward the hiding place, referring to the ma'arifah of God, precisely to the knowledge of the essence that is connected to the nature of the Kibrit al-Ahmar. Natla, we have seen the term in the matla, in the rising place of the first verse, right? Oh, sorry, this line shouldn't be here. You see here the markup, right? And it is connected to the Od al-Fawah, as we have seen. The markup here is very important because it is a clear reference to the circular understanding of the human constitution and the existence, and the circumambulation as the symbol of the whole of existence and Insan Kamil himself. So here you see we have the clear feminine person, she, then it would is the divine presence, but then we would have other addresses. We have several interlocutors here in the text. We have the plural amwash, we have the poet as Insan Kamil. We have a blind man, and this blind man is quite interesting because the creator of the zajal was blind. Ibn Arabi mentions in his Rasail some other Sufi who were called al-ama, the blind. And here we ask ourselves, what kind of blindness is he referring to? After all this process, he meets a blind man. What is that? This is here, a blind human being. But this man is a human being, is an insan. And so he asks, who are you looking for? He said, your Lord, in dialect, right? Sid is Sayyid, Sayyiduka. Why they mention Sayyid instead of Rab or something else more directly, clearly referred to the divine? Is he looking for the divine in the human form, in the sense of the Insan Kamil? Al-Talib al-Matlub is the Insan Kamil himself, is the Kibrit al-Ahmar, in the sense of the place of realization of all possible knowledge for humans, which is referred as the Insan Kamil. That's something to see. So this blind man is an ignorant man? Is blindness in sense of ignorance, or rather in another sense is the kind of blindness that is blindness to the multiplicity and the diversity, to the distinction of things, so that it is a human seeing essentially the unity of all things. I would rather incline myself toward this reading rather than thinking of of an ignorant man, but still the literary reference to the blind of Cabra is there. So many other things to comment on, but I will stop so that you have the occasion to share commentaries and make questions in case. Of course, the fourfold composition of the elixir, which equals 4 in number, but this fourfold composition clearly referring to the Kaaba and the 4 corners and the tetractys nature of human being himself. So many interesting points in this amazing poem. I think of it, as of any other text of Ibn Arabi, as a kaleidoscopic device, an artiluge and a structure that help us contemplate the whole in a little masterpiece. So very, very impressed by this poem. When you get inside and you let the poem go. Let me finish by commenting this. In manuscripts, we have an alternative reading, which is Dhal kibrit al-ahmar lakathu ma'adum. So we have an opposition in many copies. So instead of ma'alum, we have ma'adum, and instead of ma'adum, we have ma'alum. Was reflecting on this thing, and I find out that nevertheless, the meaning come to the same. So either way feels fine to me. You will let me know if you have a different approach. So, of course, being known here refers to the fact that Ibn Arabi is known as the Kibrit al-Ahmar. He himself knows his station, but also it means that it is an intelligible reality. That is, in fact, ma'adum is not really existent. So it's non-existent, intelligible reality. But I believe this is interchangeable. Let me see your appreciation. And maybe just a commentary, and I promise I finished, just to let you know that my translation is not a mistake. From the beginning of the 10 days of Ashura, you would say, well, Ashura is the 10th day of Muharram, of the first month of Ramadan, of the year. But it's not the case. According to, well, see the note. On this time as a designation, not the 10 days of Muharram, but on the 10 days of the month of Dhul Hijjah, preceding the Eid al-Adha, you have to go and check this amazing voluminous work on the old Ben Guzman by Emilio Garcia Gomez, the predecessor in these studies, the most immediate master and predecessor in these studies to Corriente. Then Corriente made the whole study and translation much better afterwards. But Todo Ben Guzman remains really literary and beautiful translations to check. So that's why we have the Ashura here is representing really the number 10. And you have to start preparing your Eid, which is also your returning, is also your Oud, your transformation. Because if you are not, you see, when I use the term make yourself complete wafar, in fact, it also means to make savings, to invest your life properly. Because if you don't invest it, if you don't become complete with all those stones, if you don't keep the stones within your essential realization, then you will have not the money to buy your lamb. You will not be ready for the sacrifice to happen, so that you can return through this Eid, through this celebration, to the essential knowledge that implies the dissolution provided by the elixir and the philosophical stone of the red sulphur, so that you get dissolved into the essential knowledge. And this cannot be, if it is not through this initiatic death, the fana that is signified by the sacrifice. So that's it. Thank you very much for your kind attention.